The Abu Dhabi Grand Prix is over, as is the F1 2023 season, and Max Verstappen ends it with a dominant victory. Was it ever really in doubt though? Anyway, in this video, I am going to be, for the final time this season, doing a data analysis from the Grand Prix. Now let's get into the video. As usual, I'm going to be talking about Aston Martin, Mclaren, Ferrari, Mercedes and Red Bull later on, so stick around for that. The Abu Dhabi Grand Prix delivered a race which surprised a lot of teams and drivers. Heading into the race, the thoughts from Pirelli and many of the teams was that it was going to be a fairly simple one-stop race, going from the medium to the hard compound tyres. You could see this because during the opening stints, no one was really pushing, and a lot of drivers were opting to lift and coast to try and save both fuel and also nurse the tyres. If they were planning on doing a multi-stop strategy, then they likely wouldn't have been trying to save the tyres like they were during the first stint. This also meant that when drivers did stop, we saw a massive improved pace from the undercut, meaning that the undercut was very powerful. To show this, I have the race times here from Fernando Alonso, who was one of the first drivers to box in the Grand Prix. On fresh hards, Alonso was instantly able to go 1 second faster than he was when he was managing the pace on the medium compound of tyres. I believe a few drivers opted to pit early, and these early stops is what triggered a two-stop race for pretty much everyone else. The fastest lap in the Grand Prix was a 1:26.993 by Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. This time was 1.4 seconds faster than last year's fastest lap, showing the faster pace of this year's Grand Prix after the first stint. So, for the final time this year, in the midfield, what teams looked good and what teams were not looking so good? Well, one team that really didn't look great all race weekend long, which in a way sums up their year, was Haas. Hülkenberg had a very strong qualifying, but his race pace was nowhere near what he could achieve in qualifying. As for his teammate Kevin Magnussen, the race was just a disaster. Haas opted to run two different cars in the race. Hülkenberg ran the original spec car, whereas Magnussen ran the new spec car in order to see where the differences were to try and just learn something for next year. To show just how much their pace was lacking, I have brought up the times of Hülkenberg and Alex Albon in the Williams. Here you can see just how much Haas was struggling. As I mentioned earlier, everyone was managing the pace at the beginning on the medium tyres, which is why Albon and Hülkenberg are lapping very evenly. However, when it comes to the hard stint, you can just see how Albon is able to manage the pace much better than Hülkenberg. Nico starts off well, but his tyres and pace drop much faster than Albon. And when it comes to the final stint, Albon is able to lap approximately 1 second a lap faster. For Haas, they are going to be glad that this season is over. They have a lot of work to do though to improve their car for next year, because I fear that if they don't improve the car very much over race conditions, then next year, Haas will be a long way away from anyone else, and they will finish last in the Constructors' Championship and not be able to do anything about it. Haas may have been struggling, but AlphaTauri, in my opinion, had a fantastic race, and they showed great pace. Yuki Tsunoda even managed to lead a handful of laps, which I think goes to show a lot about how far they've come this season. AlphaTauri opted to take a risk and do a one-stop with Yuki Tsunoda, and I believe that is because they knew that in order to potentially beat Williams in the Constructors' Championship, they would have to do something different in the race, and the pace from AlphaTauri was strong. To show just how strong their pace was in the race, I've brought up the times of Oscar Piastri in the Mclaren and Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri. When Tsunoda changed onto the hard tyres, you can see just how his pace becomes very comparable to Piastri. Obviously the medium pace was managed by the whole field, but when Tsunoda stopped for fresh hards, he actually has similar pace to what was the 4th fastest car this weekend. For AlphaTauri, they may have missed out on 7th in the Constructors' Championship. However, I believe they're in a great position to challenge even Alpine for 6th place at the very least if they continue to improve the car at this rate for next season. And given what we're expecting with closer relationship between Red Bull and Racing Bulls, then 6th place might be actually quite easy for them. I just want to say that if you are enjoying the video, then I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. Now, let's get back to the video and let's talk about the top 5 teams, starting with Aston Martin. For Aston Martin, it was always going to be an uphill battle for them to beat McLaren to 4th in the Constructors' Championship, but they did have a very solid race. Alonso tried his absolute best to beat them, and he managed to finish within 10 seconds of Oscar Piastri, and was only 15 seconds behind Lando Norris, despite the circuit being one of the better circuits for McLaren in the final few races. For his teammate Stroll, it was a 10th place finish, giving him only one final point. For Alonso, this race was a solid end to the season. However, there was one thing that was massively lacking, and that was straight line speed of the Aston Martin car. The car was typically one of the more draggy cars throughout the season, and this is an area that, yes, they've definitely improved on as the season went on, but going into 2024, Aston will be looking to further improve their car in terms of straight line speed efficiency. Alonso made the most of the race by being one of the first drivers in the race to stop for fresh tyres, and this gave him a great boost early on. But next year, he will need a stronger car, as McLaren and Mercedes are clearly faster than the Aston Martin, as is the Ferrari at this point in time. For McLaren in the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, they secured 4th in the Constructors' Championship with a great race. They were fast, and Lando Norris was able to show fantastic race pace. His teammate Oscar Piastri was struggling a little bit for pace compared to his teammates, and to show that, I have the times of Piastri and Norris. Here, when you look at their times, you can see how Piastri is still struggling with race pace when compared to his teammates. Piastri for most of the season has been a little bit harder on his tyres when compared to Lando Norris, and you can see that when you look at these hard tyre stint times as well. That being said, you cannot take away from Piastri. He's had a great rookie season, and he has learned a lot that he can take into next year. His one-lap pace has been incredible at certain races, and for him next year he just needs to build on this and build on his race pace. With the experience he has gained, I'm sure he will develop and learn how to better race around a tyre stint during the Grand Prix. For Lando Norris, he just needs to keep up building on what he has been doing in the last few years. McLaren are getting stronger and stronger, and next year they could be in a perfect position to go one better than their current finishing position. With Piastri no longer being a rookie, I anticipate we will see him feature more with Lando Norris, and we could see them take the fight to Mercedes, and maybe even Ferrari. For Ferrari, they just missed out on 2nd in the Constructors' Championship, but Charles Leclerc did everything possible to try and secure the position. He had a fantastic race. Going into the race, I was worried tyre wear may affect him more than the cars around him, but Leclerc did manage to pace and the tyres very well, and he was able to fend off the McLarens and George Russell, who I thought would pose a stronger threat. For his teammate, however, Sainz just didn't have a good race. Ferrari screwed him over with a terrible strategy call, but it's not just this, he didn't have great pace, and to show this I have the times of Leclerc and Sainz. Here you can see how terrible Sainz's pace was. When he boxed for fresh tyres on lap 24, you would have expected his pace to become faster than Leclerc with the fresher tyres, but he was nowhere. Not only that, but his pace seemed to drop off faster than Charles Leclerc as well. For Sainz, it has been a fairly disappointing end to the season. His pace has dropped off overall versus his teammates in the final few races, and going into next year, if the team continue to focus the car more around Leclerc, then I can see Charles having a much stronger 2024, and he may be in a position to win a couple of races, whereas Sainz, he might be struggling to just get on the podium. For Mercedes, they just barely hung on to 2nd in the Constructors' Championship, and it all came down to what George Russell could do in the final race. His teammate Lewis Hamilton had a very difficult race, and to show that, I have the times from both drivers. Pretty much all race long, Hamilton was just a few tenths of a second off of his teammate George Russell, but over time, this started to build. Also, in terms of tyre wear, it looks like Lewis lost the tyres a little bit quicker than Russell. Overall, Mercedes finished 2nd in the Constructors' Championship, but I don't think they ended the year well with the 2nd fastest car. They were probably the 4th fastest car overall by the end, and they only finished in 2nd place due to being more consistent throughout the season. Without major improvements going into next year, Mercedes could potentially be on the back foot a little bit, I think. And finally, for Red Bull and Max Verstappen, he ended the year pretty much how he started it, by dominating the competition. And really, this should not have been a surprise to anyone. The circuit is nicely suited to the strengths of the Red Bull car when it comes to race trim. Teammate Sergio Perez also had a strong race and he was able to come back through the field, and he would have finished in 3rd place if not for a penalty for contact with Lando Norris. And for Perez, this was a very impressive race in terms of pace. When you look at the times of Perez and Verstappen, you can see that actually this is the closest that Perez has been to Verstappen for quite a long time in terms of pace. And for Sergio, this could help give him some confidence that next year, if he can get on top of the car, then another P2 in the Drivers' Championship could be his. If the field is closer though to Red Bull, I'm not sure where he will finish. So I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who has supported the channel this year. It has been incredible to see how we've been able to grow the channel from less than 400 subs at the start of the year to well over 4,000 by now. This season might be over, but the content will not be. I might not be uploading as much content as I was during the season, but there will still be content that I will be bringing your way. So if you haven't already, please as always comment, leave a like, and subscribe for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching.